morning and good afternoon. My name is Kaylee O'Mara, and I'm an MA student at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. And this recording is for the Institute for the Study of International Development interview series. I'm here with Sefora Rangoanana. She is a researcher, economist, and climate advocate. She's a 2021 IMF Youth Fellow and a current research assistant at the African Climate Foundation, specializing in geopolitics and diplomacy. The ACF is a grant-making nonprofit based out of Cape Town, South Africa, supporting sustainable environmental and economic development for the continent. Prior to joining the African Climate Foundation, Sefora worked as a research coordinator at the Africa Center for Evidence. She holds a master's degree in financial economics from the University of Johannesburg. Sefora, thank you so much for being here today. To start off, I would love to hear a bit about your academic and research background and how you came to join the foundation.
Oh, thank you very much, Kaylin. It's lovely talking to you. So my background actually is in financial economics, as you mentioned, but somehow I got myself into climate because I was working on various research on climate change. And finance, so that's how I got into the climate space. So because my background is actually it's different, because in financial economics we do modeling, equity, and stuff like that. But they got to complement each other, because now as I'm working on climate as a research assistant in climate change and diplomacy and stuff like that, so I mostly focus on climate finance, development finance, how it affects everything that we have to do in order to fight climate change, climate finance and adaptation, mitigation. So that's what I'm trying to follow. Yes.
That's great. So I'm hearing you say that you think that they're complementary, economics and the study of climate change. I'm wondering.
Yes, they're complementary because in my study of financial economics, it was more into international finance. I'm looking into international finance mostly because my focus is on minor thesis and stuff like that. For my master's, it was actually in international finance.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you describe your position as a research assistant in geopolitics and diplomacy? How does that fit into your knowledge of economics and now your work on climate change?
Oh, okay. So it fits perfectly good, because what I do is mostly carry out extensive research on our thematic areas in terms of evidence-informed research. So if we're trying to find evidence on so many things, say now, I'll just make an example. Since I'm in climate finance, mostly I work into how the evidence in building adaptation finance within Africa, loss and damage within Africa, and then now it has been a shift into many African countries because they were in debt due to remember the what was going on. There was COVID, and then so many competing sectors for financing, for fiscal financing in different countries. So now I'm looking into things like how can the debt swaps help? How can the climate debt swap actually help countries to move forward into energy transition? So that's what I'm doing, and then I look into finances that have been dispersed by the European Union, China, Africa programs, things like that. Maybe now we're looking into focusing on US Africa program. I don't know if you follow me, but now Nigeria is in talks with the US in terms of them funding their energy transitions. through their initiatives. So that's what I do.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of really exciting developments.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to your role as an IMF Youth Fellow. What was it like working with and in such a large multilateral organization? And how was Africa represented in the organization?
Oh, in IMF. So IMF was actually focusing on Sub-Saharan. We were a group of young youth fellows from Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. So the program was like focusing on climate change, digital economy, and inequality, equity, all of those things based in gender and other stuff. So what we're working on was helping the IMF carry out some research and then do some presentations on how best the policies can be shaped for our countries, because now people will be based maybe in Ghana, we'll be having representatives, youth fellows from Ghana, Nigeria, Lesotho, Namibia. So it was just all of us would come up with some ideas, do some presentations before our country directors, things like that. So it was actually great. We got to work on different projects, but mostly for me, it was on climate change and digital economy, that sector.
That sounds like a really exciting opportunity.
Yes.
So I know that Africa is a minor contributor to GHG emissions historically, but it's already feeling dramatic impacts of climate change. I'm thinking through severe weather events, droughts, extreme heat. From your perspective, how can climate action be just? What do you and your colleagues advocate for?
For us at ACF, we actually looking at how will the just transition affect different sectors, because we are focusing on agriculture mostly, because we have a sector, not really a sector, a part of ACF working on agricultural stuff and food security, all those value chain into how are they affected. And then for us, we create many dialogue platforms where we allow stakeholders to come in one space and unpack everything into how do we move forward. So the ACF level we are grant making. So now we recant some of the things to our to some organizations that will be carrying out the dialogue platforms on say loss and damage, on just transition, making people understand, stakeholders understand what it involves, how will the sector change, how will people's jobs be affected. So that's what we are just doing, trying to support different stakeholders. And then we also have we have partnered with many research institutions, not basically saying of public policy and governance. So that's where we mostly do our dialogues in terms of different topics around this transition.
I'm wondering, regarding your research and support into geopolitics, I'm wondering, is there relative agreement among different African nations on climate action? Is there agreement on ways forward? Is there agreement on transition? What do the talks and negotiations within Africa look like?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that. Remember, as ATF, we are trying to maybe support Africa, because we are not just focusing on South Africa. We are focusing on Africa as a continent. So what we are trying to do is support and amplify the voice of Africa in terms of climate change, so that they have one voice when we dealing with climate change and issues of Europe, how we interact with Europe and other parts of the world. So let me get your question.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe I just forgot.
If
but
you
try to amplify and be in one voice, because I'll make an example now. There's a debate going on in terms of should gas be phased out in many African economies, because we know that South Africa uses most gas to power its different sectors, and then gas is said to be very not so good for us transitioning into a less carbon economy. So now we're looking into how do we have one voice in terms of, okay, can this be used as a transition? Can gas just be used for this time only as a transition or a bridge into renewable energy? But we know that Africa is still underdeveloped. Its industries is less industrialized, and then now it will need gas for most of its sectors, because renewable energy cannot support, say, industrial machinery that has, say, 50 tons, that require 50 tons of energy. So now we're trying to find a balance around all of those things by creating dialogues and inviting different stakeholders and doing our research, our thematic area research, which will be evidence-based.
Gotcha. Okay, that sounds like really interesting and really hard work. I'm wondering. So you've mentioned that South Africa, for instance, has heavy reliance on fossil fuels domestically. I'm wondering, and then I'm also thinking about how you've said how Nigeria is in conversations about their transition away from fossil fuels. How do, say, two nations like South Africa and Nigeria, I guess I'm wondering, how do they get along? Is there agreement on how they need to transition away from fossil fuels, and how quickly are their countries moving? It sounds like some are moving faster than others. Do they still all want the same things? Is there still agreement among those countries that they need to move away from fossil fuels?
There is maybe, I wouldn't say an agreement between countries within Africa, but they realize the importance of renewable energy. But we must remember that the energy transition and everything, just energy transition, should be country specific. Countries have different needs, have different strengths. They can try and transition. Maybe others are looking into maybe from 20 up to 2050 would have phased out theirs. Some up until 2060. So it's country specific, because we know that transitioning will need a lot of financing, and we know how it turned out from the Paris Agreement, that they will support the developing countries with such amounts, say 100 billion US, which hasn't been fulfilled for most of them. And then they are required to do bankable projects by the EU, try and do that. So it's not easy, because their NDCs will be so ambitious, yes, but at the same time, financing like climate finance or development finance is still a very big challenge here in Africa, because you know that many African countries are in debt distress, and then everything has just been exacerbated by the COVID, and then now inflation, everything is. So really, we have to have one voice, but the agreement, yes, towards renewable energy, yes. But how countries move in terms of everything, it will just be country specific by looking at what's their strength, where is it lacking, which sectors do they see the need for phasing out those things, which sectors really rely on fossil fuels, how many people are employed in that sector, do they have enough infrastructure to transition? It all starts, yeah.
Great. I mean that it sounds like the work that you and your colleagues do at the foundation to unify into one voice to advocate for the continent, but also taking into consideration how challenging it is that each country has their own reality. That sounds like a really interesting and really challenging landscape, and so good on you and your colleagues for doing that.
Yes, because now I said I'm mostly in climate finance. I look at the flows in terms of public finance, private finance, and private finance in Africa. It's lacking. It's lacking. Maybe we're looking into setting up carbon markets in Africa. Still a lot. It's early. We're trying to invite private sector into it, but private sector, private finance. It's not the only challenge. Still, public finance. It's still very low compared to other countries, or I would say continents. Still low. Private and public finance, it's low because remember, Africa is facing, maybe we're looking into adaptation finance, and adaptation finance, there's less, there's no data to support their financing needs, unlike in mitigation, where mitigation is happening in the north, global north. So those are the challenges, but hopefully we're trying to have a coordinated voice and moving into energy, into just energy transition. I don't know if you're following in Africa. The about just now we are heading COP 27, and about just about less than 10 countries have brought forth their energy transition and things like that, but most countries they haven't. So we don't know how they will present that and everything. So there's usually lack of data to support everything that needs to be done for them to access finance, to have bankable projects.
Gotcha. So you brought up a lot of really interesting points there. One thing I'd like to ask about is, from your perspective, where do you see more opportunity for climate finance, for financing a just transition in Africa? Do you see more opportunity with the private sector? I know you said that funds in the public sector are really low. What does it look like? Are there more opportunities, do you think, privately? Can the public sector still fund more? What does that kind of split between private and public look like for climate finance?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that question. So for climate, private finance, yes, things can look great if the private sector can see this financing just energy transition as an opportunity, because now they would want to, as private finance, like equity, they would want to have to see bankable projects. So now, if they can see that not as a restriction and something like that, maybe as an opportunity for them to enter into that market. Yes, there's a lot of gaps, like investment gaps. They should see this as an investment gap and see it as an opportunity to scale up finance. So yes, and then now the problem with that is that to mobilize funds in Africa, we need to see the growth in equity in private finance. We need to see the setting up of carbon markets. We have many instruments. Say the green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, something like that. But what still remains is that many countries do not understand how they work, what constitute a green bond, what constitute a debt swap, because these are new instruments within the space that they need to take. Because green bonds, they would require this. So I think a platform where different financial instruments can be explained and how they can be accessed, because this will form something like green exclusion. Green exclusion is many countries don't understand this. Many countries do not understand this different financial instruments within the climate space. So yes, there's an opportunity to scale up finance in the private sector.
Gotcha. Okay. If I can ask one more specific question about climate finance, I'm hearing you say, I believe you said a few minutes ago about how the global north is more focused on mitigation of climate change and countries in Africa are more focused on adaptation. And that, for me, thinks of a lot of different power dynamics and how, we know the global north certainly has more resources to deal with the impacts of climate change. Can you speak a little bit about why Africa, by and large, is I believe you said more focused on adaptation rather than mitigation?
Yes, like you mentioned. Remember, Africa in I think a report. It's a recent one. I still hope the recent one was just that Africa emits just 33% of the global greenhouse gases. So yes, we are in adaptation. We really have to adapt, because we do not produce much greenhouse gases in Africa. We do not. So yes, we are in an adaptation mode, unlike the other developed countries who have produced more emissions. So now we have to adapt mostly in agricultural sector, because we are facing different things. Climate is affecting our crop production, the drought, everything. So we have to find ways to adapt.
Right. Yeah. Again, great points, and as someone speaking to you from a global North country, trying to understand and try to get in my head just how...
There are a lot of floods now and then drought, so there's loss and damage, a lot of it, because there are different changes in how we have to do our crop production. We need some innovative ways on how can we do this. So like I said, because it's an adaptation, sometimes tracking that data, it's not easy.
I'm sure, yeah. Fascinating work. Switching gears a little bit, I know that African Climate Week started just a couple of weeks ago, I believe on August 29th. Can you share any highlights or takeaways from that week? Did you learn anything that surprised you? Did you have any interesting conversations? I would just love to hear how that week went for you and the foundation.
Oh, the African Climate Week. Remember the conversations where I just trying to escalate to the COP. Just wrote to the COP 27. So my focus basically, because I'm looking into things, everything finance. So now the takeaway from that was things like recommendations in order to scale up private finance. So one of the takeaway was that as African countries, can we just try to catalyze private finance by linking domestic capital with with international finance, maybe through the participation of the screen funds and country platforms like, I don't know if you have gone through in the last COP 26, in which South Africa was granted 8 billion in just transition, because they were able to present a well-defined strategy of its NDC. So now because we see that's lacking for most countries, can we just link domestic capital with international finance that we'll be getting from the networks that we're going, for us to have clear just energy transition strategy, so that will really help. And then what we can do as the private sector. So what the private sector can do is just that it should have the boldness to fund hard to abate sectors, because sectors that are really, people are not really looking into getting into as the private sectors like biodiversity, ecosystem preservation. Yes, so that was it. And then the private sector there was encouraged to at least develop and new asset classes based on the securitization of climate investments, and have proper and quality pricing so that they can be approached, competitive pricing. They can be approached. The countries can approach them for financing of their energy strategies and stuff like that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Those were all of my questions. Thank you so much for being here with me today and answering all my questions.
Yes.
I'm going to stop recording now, but again, thank you so much, and I really hope that I'm really grateful for the opportunity to learn a little bit more about your work.
Okay, thank you. And I did share some of the work by ACF, because as ACF we do a lot of work we really do a lot of work, and we have had so many, in terms of this JETP, just energy transition. We have a lot of success stories because we are creating dialogues, and then we have been supporting different countries like in Senegal. Currently we supported Namibia on their green hydrogen, and then we are supporting different COP presidency. The one that was that was in Egypt, not Egypt, Gabon. So different dialogues that we're making. It's actually, and then we have established Africa-Europe Foundation in 2020. So a lot of things so as a re-granter, we're not just focusing on giving out grants and stuff like that. We also do the work.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much, Sefora.